just think the Democratic Party has successfully hired him. That comment will be on every TV ad known to earth. And the reason it is effective is because, one, inflation is going up. Two, the numbers on inflation in the economy for the president are poisonous. Consumer sentiment is at its lowest level ever. And kind of the third reason is because, you mentioned previous presidents taking credit for the economy and they perhaps have nothing to do with it. There's a direct causal pattern of what this president has done in terms of the conflict in Iran and the inflationary patterns of this economy. This is a political disaster for the president, and it's a political disaster for the president made worse by the reality that we haven't accomplished our goals in this conflict and we're not planning to do so. I know we're again bombing after a few months of negotiation. If anybody thinks bombing is going to bring peace to the table, Hunter Biden has a crack pipe that he may want to smoke.
About the inflation is that
I asked you to pipe around a lot today. Thank you, Brent. We'll go to David, followed by Sarah.
regardless of the
Yeah, Gary, I think this is the whole unavoidable situation that the president is dealing with. And let's face it, he's got this Marie-Antoinette, let them eat pig kind of mentality. The American people do not like their wallet and pocketbook destroyed by needless or war situations that aren't necessarily well thought out, or with the end game in the future as to how it will all end. Americans, we enjoy a certain standard of living. Well, part of our refrain around the world is that we have this superior way of life that's born on the back of our freedoms, our ability to innovate, to work hard, to see results at the end of the month. And, this gets stripped away when Americans get their income stripped away stealthily by inflation, because that's really what it is. It's a tax. It hits, and people.
It's just a tax. It's not
on the
perpetual debt. It won't eat into core services.
Tech industry being overheated and so forth. And so there's a potentiality that 401ks are also going to deflate. And so, how do Americans climb out of, they can't work any harder. Most Americans are salaried, W-2'd. There's a big chunk of us that work as self-employed. And we feel our economy, Gary, because we don't derive huge social safety nets and benefits that other European type style democracies benefit from. If a guy loses his job, he's got a white knuckle 6 weeks of unemployment, if that, and he can't even live off of it. As some of my European friends tell me, they got a year to figure out if they can get a job or not. They get health care covered and all of that. So we endure a lot more pain, and we don't do well as a country, unfortunately. And we have, we have an amnesia. I mean, you talk about World War II and that great generation that got us through that. Well, those people are all pretty much gone and died, and we don't forget their sacrifices because that's what got us through World War II. Put us on the map as the greatest nation on the planet in world history, the greatest economic boom in world history. So, but what have you done for me lately? And every politician has to answer and account for that. And unfortunately, many of the people on the right, the politicians can't challenge this president the way others have challenged Carter, Reagan, Clinton, and down the line. President Trump operates as a mafia boss. He will find out who you are. He already knows who you are. He'll primary you. He'll go find a candidate who's going to saddle up to his viewpoints. And he's going to throw money behind you. He's going to take you out. And we've seen this also play out with regards to our international policies in the Middle East. So I think the free reign, the blank check, if we get away with that, is eventually going to run out. And I think that, as to your point, he says what he says. And thank God that he says what he says and says what he means, hopefully, because now we have information by which to check his power and the things he's trying to execute, because it's on us now. We have the onus as Americans, and our politicians included,
And,
to rally against the very things that he's talking about trying to get away with. I mean, we've seen how he is trying to neuter and defang our voting processes, mail-in ballots, redistricting, and the like, and potentially creating a national emergency disaster by which...
So there's a potentiality that 401ks are also going to deflate.
So,
And so,
man that is,
how do Americans climb out of
is about his own ego, his own power, achieving his own potential objectives, whatever those are. And whether they align with our interests or not doesn't seem to be important to him. So I think he can message a lot better with regard to the pain points we're experiencing as a country. But he doesn't do that, Gary. He doesn't. He double down. He double downs on the pain. And he leaves the politicians that are tasked with taking this to their constituents how to explain this, right? So how do you explain it in public without incurring the wrath and ire? We see this attempt to grandstand and showcase cage fighting on the White House lawn. I'm sure there's many GOP representatives ask themselves, scratching their head, like, well, we got bigger fish to fry. What are we doing displaying this? So
Peanuts and circus.
the aggrandizement, Gary, is eventually going to run out. I don't think we can tolerate too much more of it, and hopefully our 2026 election outcome reflects that. And I'll land there.
Thank you, David. We'll go to Daryl, and we'll see if the other folks we've been inviting up can make it, because we've invited folks up.
Hey, Gary, can you hear me?
No, we cannot.
Okay, well, two things. I'm going to preamble for a minute. First, I am so happy to see my buddy Scott back. And Gary, I don't know if you're going into Penn, but it's crazy because of the game tonight. And they're making people walk 4 blocks south and north just to circle back to 8th Avenue to get to New Jersey Transit. So I don't know if you were going in, but I want to let you know.
Well, yeah, but the train drops me off inside Penn Station, so I'm inside already, so I don't have to walk around to get inside.
But do you leave or you work in Penn?
No, I'm on the way into work.
No, what I mean is, do you have to leave Penn Station to your office, or do your office...
I take the subway. Take the subway.
Oh, lucky you, Gary, because I just had to walk all the way down to 26th Street to get over to Penn. So, quickly, to William's point, the tax cuts don't necessarily trigger inflation. Tax cuts can trigger inflation. It's depend on how they structure the tax cuts. The tax cuts to the rich, the last round, won't necessarily trigger inflation, but what they'll do is, because it's less tax revenue, we'll probably have to increase our debt, like issue more like bills and bonds and notes and stuff. So it's going to increase our debt. What I think we should be more concerned with was the jobs report, because the jobs report was good. And so what that means is that it's less likely that the Fed is going to lower rates. If the jobs report had continued to be bad, the Fed might have considered lowering rates to kind of help the economy. But if more people are working, then the Fed doesn't see it as necessary to lower rates. And so the
we're experiencing as a country. But he doesn't do that, Gary. He doesn't. He doubles down. He doubles down on the pain. And he uses the politicians that are tasked with taking this to their constituents how to explain this, right? So how do you explain it in public without incurring the wrath and ire? We see this attempt to grandstand and showcase cage fighting on the White House lawn. I'm sure the GOP representatives ask themselves, scratching their head, like, well, we got bigger fish to fry. What are we doing displaying this? So
Peanuts and circus.
the aggrandizement, Gary, is eventually going to run out. I don't think we can tolerate too much more of it.
Trump whispered,
And hopefully our 2026 election outcome reflects that.
We shouldn't listen to what he's saying. Don't take him at his word because
Thank you, David. We'll go to Daryl and we'll see if the other folks we've been inviting up can make it because we've invited folks up.
Hey, Gary, can you hear me? A limited number of people.
No, we cannot.
Okay, well, two things. I'm going to preamble for a minute first. I am so happy to see my buddy Scott back. And Gary, I don't know if you're going into Penn, but it's crazy because of the game tonight. Who say, well, that's not what he meant. One, how do you know what he meant? And two, then why should we believe anything that he says? How do we pick and choose what we want to believe simply because it makes us feel better, because it sounds like something we want to believe, as opposed to when he says something we don't believe, okay, now he's lying, now he's telling the truth. This is exhausting. And I think the average American, whether you're red or blue, is just exhausted with this bullshit and trying to figure out if the leader of our nation is telling us the truth ever. And it's just fucking exhausting. Excuse my French, right? It's like, I hate to use, it's like battered spouse syndrome, right? Your spouse kicks your ass, but then they bring you roses or they bring you chocolate. And then, you'll forgive them until they're kicking your ass again. And I think I think our country is going through some type of PTSD. And I think everybody just wants to get off the train, to use that euphemism.
Thank you, Daryl. We'll go to Steve, and hopefully we'll get to Ann as well. Steve.
Gary, good afternoon. It's good to see you and Scott and everybody else back together. Considering that I live in Los Angeles, the homeless capital of the country, I thought I would bring up some interesting euphemisms that go along with homeless and unhoused. For example, human error frames the individual mistakes as natural, unavoidable flaws that are caused by the system. Capacity constraints implies a person failed because the system lacks the staffing or resources needed to succeed. Process breakdown suggests a bad outcome happened because of the rules or workflows were flawed in the system, not because of the individual. Skill gap redefines poor performance as a structural training deficit within the organization, i.e. the system. Communication gap shifts the blame to the overall information sharing framework rather than a person who failed to learn linguistics. Systemic issues highlights an ingrained flaw in the organization and the system and society's structure that inherently causes poor results. Macroeconomic factors attributes an individual's financial or professional struggles to a large-scale, unavoidable economic trend because of the system. And two more, workforce realignment, a corporate term that masks mass layoffs or firings as a broad strategic structural.
As opposed to when he says something we don't believe, okay, now he's lying, now he's telling the truth. This is
explains a failure by pointing to rigid, overreaching rules that made a good outcome impossible by the individual. How does this go back to homelessness as or unhoused? I believe that the euphemism has to do with putting the blame away from the individual being homeless, and unhoused is a euphemism saying that it's society's fault. Now, I'm sure each individual situation carry its own set of facts and opinions, but to me, it always has been homeless, it always will be homeless, if it goes down easier for some people to say unhoused, that doesn't, in my mind, shift the blame to away from the individual and to the society. You can use words any way you want, and they're just words. They don't really talk about what's really going on in the individual situation. Thank you, Gary.
And I will point out that that famous poem that is attributed to the arrival of the great gift from the French people, and that would be the Statue of Liberty, says, give me your homeless. It doesn't say give me your unhoused. And so I don't know why it's politically incorrect to call somebody homeless.
And the French have been screwing us ever since, and they constantly talk bad about the American government and Americans as well.
Well, that's an attitude that is ingrained in their society. Thank you, Steve. We'll go to Ann and maybe time, but I don't think so, anyone else, so I'm not going to call anybody else up on the stage. Ann?
Hey, Gary. The U.S. national debt is at 40 trillion, and the debt to GDP is 121%. In 1980, it was 34%. So regardless of who the president was or is, whether it was Kamala or Trump, it's my opinion that Kamala would have taken our debt to GDP to 200%. And she would have invested in woke programming. I mean, most of DOGE eliminated educational programs for woke education, LGBTQ stuff. It's all out there. And thank God we have Donald Trump, who is our president, who eliminated all this fraud, waste, and abuse. AOC's multi-trillion-dollar Green New Deal.
What does that have to do with the question? And I allowed for the homeless discussion because I brought it up earlier. But what does your projections of what might have happened if Kamala had been hired as our president, and your analysis of how great a job DOGE has done, which is held by some but not by all, have to do with the president's
putting the blame away from the individual being homeless.
Yeah, I think when Trump says he loves inflation, he's saying that he loves power that he has to spend and engage in what he wants to engage. Because if we had a balanced budget of only $5 trillion a year, not the $7 trillion, he would actually have no power because it's already all allocated. And so that is a trick that every president is essentially exploiting. And until we actually have a balanced budget in this country and start paying down our debt and eliminate wasteful spending, especially in Medicare, Medicaid, we will continue to see inflation. I think somebody earlier said that it's not just the inflation, it's the actual job marketplace. I mean, if you don't have a job and you don't have an income, the inflation is a little bit irrelevant to you because you can't even survive. If you do have a job and you are earning an income, well, then you're just trying to keep up with inflation. So there's those two aspects. But I'm just saying that when Trump just says stuff because he's on camera. It's just like a clubhouse room. He's going to say stuff and then people attack him for it. But either way, our economy, 40% of it is borrowed. And we're spending $7 trillion a year. We're only taking in $5 trillion. It doesn't work this way. Our debt to GDP at 122% is not functional for our society. We have to cut the spending and we have to start paying down the debt. We can't keep kicking the can down the road and say this is a civilizational economy, that everything is baked in, and if America goes down, then it all goes. It's not the way it works. We're doing altruistic economic policy. State and economy are connected. We should have them separated in the same way we have separation of church and state. And it's my opinion.
And I'm going to let you have the last word because we are out of time. Thank you for that. But I would just add, I'm not so certain everybody would consider Medicare and Medicaid as wasteful. Folks, we are here Monday through Friday from 5 o'clock New York time. So at 5 o'clock New York time tomorrow for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum. Until then, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
People did not like what I had to say. A lot of anti-Trumpers in there. Oh.